The girl hadn't spoken a word in 3 days. Ezra Thorne counted them off like tally marks on his cabin wall. 3 sunrises, 3 bowls of stew pushed away, barely touched. 3 nights of her sitting by the window staring at mountains that held secrets she wouldn't share. When old Pete had brought her down from the mining camp, his weathered face carried the same haunted look as hers. "Found her wandering the Gulch Road," Pete had said, pressing $20 silver into Ezra's palm. "Miners say she ain't spoke since, well, since whatever happened up there. Townfolk won't take her. You're the only one lives far enough out." Ezra had taken the money and the girl both, though he wasn't sure which was the heavier burden. Now she sat cross-legged on his porch, auburn hair catching the dying light, fingers working at something in her lap. Up close, Ezra could see the careful stitches she'd torn from her dress hem. Blue thread pulled loose and rewoven into patterns that meant nothing to him but everything to her trembling hands. "Hungry?" he asked, same as every evening. She didn't look up, didn't nod, just kept weaving thread like her life depended on the rhythm. Ezra had lived alone on this mountain for 8 years. He knew silence the way other men knew scripture, every shade and weight of it. This girl's quiet wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that came after screaming, after words had been used up or beaten out of someone. The mining camp sat 5 miles north, tucked into a canyon where men clawed silver from stone and left their souls in the dark. Ezra had heard the stories that drifted down with the wind, claim jumpers, knife fights, worse things that happened when desperate men thought no one was watching. But looking at this girl's careful, methodical fingerwork, watching how she flinched when shadows moved too quick across the porch boards, Ezra suspected someone had been watching, someone who'd made sure she couldn't tell what she'd seen. As twilight settled over the peaks, she finally raised her head. For just a moment her eyes met his, pale green like creek water, old beyond their years. Then hoofbeats echoed up the mountain trail. 3 riders emerged from the pine shadows, their horses lathered with sweat and urgency. Ezra recognized the lead man immediately, Buck Rawlings, foreman of the Silver Creek mine. The 2 flanking him wore badges that caught the last light, their faces grim beneath hat brims. The girl's thread work stopped. Her small hands went perfectly still. "Evening, Thorne," Rawlings dismounted, spurs jangling against stone. "Heard you took in a stray from our camp." Ezra kept his rifle within arm's reach, leaning against the porch rail. "Girl needed shelter. I provided it. Mighty generous of you." One of the lawmen, a thin man with nervous eyes, stepped forward. "But she's wanted for questioning. Camp murder 3 nights back." Mine supervisor found with his throat opened. The girl hadn't moved, but Ezra caught the slight hitch in her breathing. Her fingers gripped the blue thread so tight her knuckles went white. "Funny thing," Rawlings continued, pulling a flask from his vest. "Girl was seen leaving his cabin right around the time it happened. Only witness we got." He took a long pull of whiskey. "Course she ain't exactly forthcoming with testimony." Ezra studied the men's faces, the way Rawlings wouldn't quite meet his eyes, how the deputies kept glancing at each other like they shared an uncomfortable secret. Maybe she's got good reason to keep quiet. Maybe she's got good reason to disappear permanent like. The second deputy's hand drifted toward his sidearm. "Dead girls tell no tales, they say." The words hung in the mountain air like smoke. Ezra felt the weight of choice settling on his shoulders, the same crushing pressure he'd known as a cavalry scout, when split-second decisions meant life or death for good men. Behind him the girl's breathing quickened. Still no words, but her silence spoke volumes about what these men represented, what they'd come to finish. "She stays," Ezra said quietly. Rawlings' face hardened. "You harboring a killer, Thorne, that makes you complicit. Makes me a man who protects children from wolves." The foreman's laugh held no warmth. "Wolves, is it? Interesting choice of words." He swung back onto his horse, leather creaking. "We'll be back tomorrow with proper warrants. Judge Hartwell don't take kindly to mountain hermits obstructing justice." As the riders disappeared into gathering darkness, Ezra felt the girl's eyes on him. When he turned, she was holding up her thread work, a complex pattern that looked almost like letters. crude but deliberate stitching that spelled out a single word: please. Dawn brought smoke on the horizon. Ezra woke to the acrid smell drifting through his cabin windows, and when he stepped onto the porch, he could see the black column rising from the direction of town, too thick and dark for cook fires, too early for anything good. The girl sat in her usual spot, but today her threadwork formed different letters. They burned. Burned what? Ezra asked, though ice was already forming in his gut. She pointed toward the smoke, then at herself. Her meaning was clear. They'd torched whatever evidence might contradict their story about her guilt. Hoofbeats again, but this time from multiple directions. Ezra counted at least 6 riders approaching from the east trail, 3 more picking their way up the western slope. They'd surrounded his mountain. Inside, he told the girl. She shook her head, pointing at the cabin's single door. Trap, her gesture said. No back way out. Smart child. Ezra had taught himself to think like prey during his scouting days, always mapping escape routes and defensive positions. His cabin sat exposed on a flat shelf of rock, good visibility, poor cover. The eastern riders arrived first. Rawlings rode with them again, but now he wore a deputy's badge of his own. Behind him came Judge Hartwell himself, a corpulent man whose expensive suit looked ridiculous in the wilderness. Ezra Thorne, Hartwell called out, his voice carrying the authority of purchased law. You stand accused of harboring a fugitive and obstructing justice. Surrender the girl and submit to arrest. What happened to the supervisor's cabin? Ezra called back. Tragic fire, Rawlings answered. Lost all kinds of evidence. Makes witness testimony even more crucial. The western riders had positioned themselves behind a boulder fall, rifles glinting, professional placement. These weren't just deputies, they were hired guns, the kind that followed gold and silver strikes like vultures. You got 1 minute to decide, Hartwell announced. Girl comes with us, or we take her over your body. Ezra glanced down at the child beside him. She'd stopped her threadwork and was staring at the men with the same expression he'd seen on wounded animals, cornered, desperate, ready to bite. But then she did something unexpected. She reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small object, pressing it into Ezra's palm. A silver locket, tarnished and dented, with initials carved into its face. J.H., the supervisor's locket, physical proof she'd been in his cabin. But as Ezra opened it, his blood went cold. Inside was a photograph, not of the supervisor's family, but of the girl herself. Younger, smiling, with a woman who shared her green eyes. Understanding hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't about murder. This was about silencing a witness to something far worse. The minute was up. That's my mother, the girl whispered. The words came out cracked and unused, like rusted hinges finally opening. Ezra's head snapped toward her, the first sound she'd made since arriving. He kept our picture, said it reminded him of what he owned. Her voice grew stronger, pain transmuting into something harder. Mama died in the cave-in last spring, the one that wasn't no accident. Ezra's hands clenched around the locket. The Silver Creek mine disaster had killed 11 workers, including several families. Official reports blamed unstable rock, but rumors persisted about shortcuts taken, safety measures ignored for the sake of profit. The supervisor, he told me things when he thought nobody would ever know. The girl's words came faster now, like water through a broken dam. How they set charges wrong on purpose. How the safety inspectors got paid to look the other way. Names, dates, everything. She pulled more items from her pockets. Scraps of paper, bits of correspondence, a small leather journal, evidence she'd been collecting, piece by piece, from the man who'd destroyed her world. I wasn't gonna kill him, she continued, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. Just wanted proof for the territorial marshal, but he caught me in his cabin, and when he put his hands, she couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. Ezra understood. The supervisor's death hadn't been murder. It had been a child protecting herself from a monster. What's your name, girl? Jenny. Jenny Holbrook. She looked up at him with those old soul eyes. My papa called me his little mountain flower, said I was strong enough to grow anywhere. Below them, Rawlings was growing impatient. Time's up, Thorn. Ezra studied the evidence Jenny had gathered, enough to hang half the mine's leadership if it reached the right hands. But first they had to survive the next hour. Jenny, he said quietly, you remember what your papa taught you about mountain flowers? She nodded. Sometimes they got to bend near to breaking in hard storms, but their roots go deep, and they always come back stronger. He pressed his rifle into her hands. You know how to use this. Another nod. Mountain children learned early. There's a cave behind that rockfall, 50 yards north. Trail's hidden, but it leads down to the main road. You get there, you flag down any rider heading toward the territorial capital. What about you? Ezra smiled, and for the first time in years it felt genuine. Someone's got to water the flowers. The gunfight lasted 7 minutes. Ezra had chosen his ground well. The cabin's porch gave him elevation and cover, while the hired guns had to advance across open rock. His first shot took Rawlings clean through the chest, sending the corrupt foreman tumbling from his horse. Judge Hartwell screamed orders from behind his men, but mountain acoustics scattered his words. The western riders tried to flank, but Ezra's old cavalry training served him well. He moved like smoke between positions, appearing just long enough to drop another target, before vanishing. When the territorial marshal arrived 3 days later, he found 5 bodies cooling in the mountain air, and Ezra Thorn sitting calmly on his porch, cleaning his rifle. Jenny's testimony, corroborated by the evidence she'd collected, unraveled the entire conspiracy. The Silver Creek mine closed within a month. 17 men faced charges ranging from negligent homicide to conspiracy. Judge Hartwell fled to Mexico with whatever gold he could carry. The girl stayed with Ezra through that first winter, helping him repair damage from the gunfight and learning to read from his small collection of books. She never spoke much. Trauma had taught her the value of careful words, but when she did, each sentence carried weight. Spring brought a letter from her aunt in Denver, a school teacher who'd been searching for Jenny since the mine disaster. The reunion was tearful but necessary. Jenny needed education, needed a future beyond these lonely peaks. But before she left, she taught Ezra something important. Mountain flowers come back, she said, pressing a small packet of seeds into his weathered hands. Every year, no matter how hard the winter. Years later, when Ezra was old and his joints ached with cold, he would tend the wildflower patch that bloomed each summer beside his cabin. Visitors occasionally asked about the carefully tended garden so far from civilization, but he never explained. Some stories were too precious for words. On quiet evenings, when wind carried voices down from the high peaks, he sometimes heard her laughter echoing off stone walls, not the broken child who'd arrived in silence, but the strong woman she'd become. A territorial judge now, they said. First woman ever appointed to the bench, known for her fairness and her particular interest in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The mountain man would smile and return to his flowers, knowing that some seeds once planted in good soil could grow into something magnificent, even in the hardest ground. Even after the longest winter,